Barry Gardiner, Labour MP for Brent North, is with me live in the studio. Barry, welcome. Why did you take money from Christine Lee, and what due diligence did you do in checking she was who she said she was?
Yes. Quite simply, I was shocked today when I had the meeting with the Director of Parliamentary Security to find out that she had been engaged in illegal activity. She and her company were, she was a person who had been feted by number 10 Downing Street. She was somebody who'd received awards from Theresa May. She was a well-known figure who had been feted for her community work. I believed her to be bona fide. I believed her to be genuine. And I am shocked. I'm actually very upset, but I'm also really very angry that somebody who I trusted sought to abuse that trust in the way
but what
that
checks
she did.
Did you do?
Yeah. I did all the standard checks for reporting in the Register of Parliamentary Interest to make sure that it was properly reported, it was properly recorded, and that the donor was a legitimate donor. And I also spoke with the security services at a later stage to make clear my office's engagement with Christine Lee.
Whose instigation was that?
That was that the security services first came to me.
When was that?
Roughly? Iain, I honestly don't. It's some years ago. And at no stage did they say that I should cease engagement with her or cut off relations with her and her office.
Did you not think yourself, if I've been approached by the security services, there might be something a bit dodgy here?
And that is exactly what I did. At no stage did they say that I should break off that engagement.
Did you ask whether you should?
Yes, I did.
And they said no.
They said said it was a matter for me, I think is what they actually said.
The natural implication from that is, well, maybe they wanted you to keep a relationship with her so they could keep tabs on her through you.
Well, they knew, certainly, that I was completely open and transparent with them. I discussed with them the relationship that I had with Christine Lee, so they knew that if they wanted to know anything about that relationship, then they had only to. Did
they say in terms to you, actually, we'd appreciate it if you did keep your relationship with her?
I'm not able to say that. No.
Well, you're not able to say it, or they didn't. That's two different things.
They did not ask me to cultivate the relationship with Christine Lee. No, they did not.
And how much money have you received from her and her company? And when I say you, I mean your office. I'm not. Yes. No one's accusing you of personally benefiting from this.
Thank you for clarifying.
I want to make that very clear.
Thank you.
But when we're talking about, I've got a figure of £420,000 here. Somebody else has said 700,000. Yes. That is a lot of money by anybody's standards.
Over a long period of time, of course.
It's 100,000 a year, roughly, just under.
I've known Christine Lee for coming on 20 years. So, and I don't know when first she made any donations, but all the donations were properly recorded, properly reported, and they were legitimate. I
don't think anybody's questioning whether they were properly recorded, because the Times first printed this story back in February 2017,
Indeed,
so
yes.
4 years ago. So this has been around. But I think what a lot of people will be thinking listening to you is, so the security services approached you, you continued to take money from her, and then you employed her son as well. And that, I think, it's almost unbelievable that you would do that.
Her son had worked in my office for some years as a volunteer. There was then an opening came up in the office, which was openly advertised. He applied for that and he was selected on merit. And I want to make it clear that the first thing I did after I came out of the meeting today with the Director of Security was I phoned him. I asked him to tender his resignation immediately. He did so, but the security services also made clear to me that they had no information that led them to believe that he was aware of his mother's illegal activity.
What did he say to you when you asked him to tender his resignation? Because you must have explained why.
I explained that I'd just come out of a meeting with the security services and that they had implicated his mother and that they had evidence that she had engaged in illegal activity, and therefore I had to ask for his resignation. I gave him no further information than that.
And did the security services say if they were arresting Christine Lee?
They did not.
If she's guilty of illegal activity, then presumably that would be the next step. What did she ask for in return? Or what did she expect to get in return, I suppose, is the
well, two different questions. The first one is easy to answer. She didn't ask for anything in return. I worked with her on promoting the engagement of the Chinese community in politics and in voting. And that was across all political parties. That was as part of the All-Party Group. And that was work which actually Theresa May awarded her, I think it was called a Bright Lights Award for doing, because it was seen as being very commendable civic engagement. So at all stages, I believed that she was who everybody from number 10 Downing Street down took her to be. And that's why I continued the engagement with her. So that's what she never asked for anything. What she may have sought is to be in a position of friendship with somebody who might at some stage have influence. That is certainly what the reports from the security services and the Speaker would imply, that she sought to have that relationship where at some stage it might become material.
Were you also aware that Christine Lee donated £5,000 to Ed Davies' constituency association when he was Energy and Climate Change Secretary?
I only became aware of a donation to Ed Davey today, but I did know that she had supported Liberal Democrat and I believe Conservative politicians in the past, or aspiring politicians, people who were applying for council, as part of the work that she was doing to try and promote engagement within the Chinese community.
The link here is that you were also Shadow Energy Secretary, weren't you, back under Jeremy Corbyn? And I think also you were PPS to Peter Mandelson when he was Business Secretary and had responsibility for these things. So a lot of people might draw a link here and say, well, it's clear that she, through you, wanted to influence policy on particularly energy policy. And when you were Shadow Energy Secretary, you were very pro the Chinese involvement in the Hinkley nuclear power station.
That's not entirely true. And let me say, I never had a conversation with Christine Lee about Hinkley Point or energy policy. It's not something that, to the best of my knowledge, she was ever interested in. But when Hinkley, I was actually the person who, when Theresa May did a review of Hinkley Point, I said that the government were wrong in two respects. I said that they were charging the investors far too little, that actually the taper, it's technical, let me try and make this clear. The energy cost was being paid for by Britain at £92. I said that was a premium cost. It was far too high, and actually it should be reduced because originally Hinkley Point was supposed to come on stream in 2018. It wasn't going to be.
But
I then said that also I believe that they had mistaken the reason the Chinese wanted involvement in the nuclear program, because my view was that they wanted involvement in the nuclear program in order to be able to go around the world and use it as a calling card to say to other countries, look, we've built one in the strictest regime, the strictest planning and security regime in the world, therefore we can do it for you. And therefore I thought that it was unlikely that they wanted to damage our nuclear capacity. I believe they wanted to show that they could do these things properly.
Well, Theresa May, when she announced that she was holding up the Hinkley deal, you issued a press release which backed the Chinese ambassador's warning over the suspension of that, and you accused her of closing UK PLC down. Now, that doesn't match with what you've just said.
No, I'm sorry.
Did you back the Chinese ambassador or not?
I don't recall anything of what the Chinese ambassador said.
This was reported in the Times in February 2017.
What I certainly said at the time, and actually the security threat that Theresa May investigated was ultimately proven not to exist. So that bore out what I had said, that I didn't think that they were there to try and undermine our nuclear industry. I believed that they were there to try and piggyback on it. And that was very clearly what I said at the time.
Did you ever discuss energy policy with Christine Lee?
No.
Because you were asked earlier this evening, did you discuss policy with her? And you said not in great detail. Well, that covers a multitude of sins, doesn't it? Because it means, yes, you did discuss policy, but to what extent, we don't know.
Well, let me try and clarify that then. She would ask me things about who was up and who was down in politics. So she would express what any person having a conversation with me would have asked.
Well, particularly if they were paying £420,000 to get the answers.
They were interested in knowing who was up and who was down in politics, but we never discussed any policy in detail, and I certainly never shared with her any of, either when I was a minister or when I was a shadow minister, of the policies that I was putting forward or sought her view on it.
How often do you speak to her?
The last time I spoke to her was earlier this week. That was a conversation actually where she expressed concern for my parents-in-law whose health had been poor. Prior to that, I had not spoken with her since before Christmas, and prior to that, and I think prior to then, we hadn't met for over a year.
Well, we have had COVID, but I mean, it sounds to me as though she's actually become a personal friend.
Oh, indeed. Look, this is why I feel very abused by it and very upset, because I regarded her as a friend. I regarded her as a legitimate businesswoman who had been fated across all political parties in this country as somebody who was a good community servant. I believe that that's what she was. Today, when I found out that that was not who she was, and that the security services had evidence to the contrary, I was deeply upset and actually very angry. But I feel that I've been abused by her, and that she has tried to abuse that friendship.
Have you been advised by the security services not to contact her again?
They haven't, but I've.
So you haven't tried to contact her today?
No, of course not. No, I will not. I will not contact her again. Absolutely. I mean, it would be ridiculous to do so, quite honestly.
You're running a very high-profile campaign at the moment on fire and rehire, which presumably is costing a lot of money. Who is funding that?
It was the 22 unions who funded that in its entirety.
A lot of people are going to say that this is the equivalent of, I didn't realise I was at a party. You can see the equivalence there, can't you?
They can say that, why did you not know that somebody was a spy? I had conversations with the security services. They had no intelligence that she was a spy, but I was cautious.
They must have had a suspicion, otherwise they wouldn't have asked to speak to you.
Indeed, and because she was engaged with Chinese businesses as a solicitor in this country, acting for Chinese businesses in this country, that is precisely why I was cautious, and it's precisely why I spoke with the security services.
And going back to her son, you said she had no influence over appointments or whatever. But again, a lot of people will say, well, that just doesn't ring true. If she had no influence over appointments, why on earth would you appoint her son?
I explained to you, he had volunteered in my office for a couple of years before the appointment became available, before the job became available. It was openly advertised. She had no role in the appointment, and she has had no role in any of the appointments for staff in my office. And that was one of the steps that I took to make sure that there was a clear separation between the money that she paid directly to the employee, but she had no role in their appointment and no role in their management. And that was the separation of the finance from the politics.
A few weeks ago, Richard Bergen appeared on Cross Question, and I asked him about China, and he kept deflecting it all towards America, wouldn't answer questions on China. And I kept asking him, do you consider what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs a genocide? And he then would answer with talking about America. Do you consider what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs a genocide?
I've stated so. If you look at what I've said about China in the past 6 months, I've been involved in the Democracy Forum, which I chair, where we've done investigations into the Belt and Road program that the Chinese have, where I've been highly critical of that.
What they're doing in Hong Kong?
What they're doing in Hong Kong, but also with the Uyghurs. And of course, as I think I mentioned to you, over their stance at COP26 in blocking a deal that put an end to coal. So I have been highly critical of the Chinese policy. And that's on the record. So I have no fears that they can say that for their investment they got good value. I believe they will look at this and say, well, actually, they didn't.
Has Keir Starmer spoken to you today?
No.
Because some Conservative MPs are saying the whip should be withdrawn from you over this.
Well, I would expect a Conservative MP to say that.
Well, you would, to be fair, you would say it if the boot was on the other foot, wouldn't you? If this was Russian money going to a Conservative MP's office, I suspect that you would be on the media saying, well, this stinks.
And that's why it's really important that I point out to you that the security services today, whilst they said that they had now got evidence that money that had come from improper sources had found its way into politics in this country, I specifically asked them whether that was about the donations that had been made into my office, and they said they had no information to that effect at all. So that would not be the right conclusion to draw.
Are you a useful idiot? I mean, why did they choose you?
Well, I assume they believed that I was somebody who would play a role in the political system in this country, and that they might at some stage be able to leverage that. They haven't been able to. I've made sure that they've not been able to by the precautions that I've taken, by speaking to the security services, by being open and transparent in all cases, and by making sure that actually at all stages I speak my mind, whether it's about China or about anything else.
A lot of people in your constituency will be listening to this. Do you have a message for them?
Yes. I would like them to know that the reason I had people who were working in my office paid for by Christine Lee was precisely so I could offer a better service to them. I had caseworkers employed who were then providing my constituents with a good service. I don't regret the fact that they did that. What I regret is that clearly somebody was trying to leverage and abuse that relationship and that friendship that I had with them, ultimately in order to gain some advantage in the future. They haven't been able to do that, and I'm very glad they haven't, and I'm very angry about it.
7. We've just had a word with Barry and his team, and Barry would actually be quite willing to take calls from LBC listeners for the next half an hour. So if you would like to ask Barry a question about any aspect of what you've heard over the last 25 minutes, be my guest, 0345 6060 973. And I should make clear, Barry offered to do this. We haven't sort of strong-armed him into it in any way. Ben Kentish, what did you make of that?
Well, it is hard to say because we simply don't know what Christine Lee thought she was getting out of that relationship that Barry Gardiner was talking about there. He was quite insistent, wasn't he, that he couldn't see what potential gain she had gotten from that significant investment, £420,000 over several years. But of course, unless we speak to her, which I suspect may prove difficult, it is very difficult to say just whether there were benefits to the Chinese Communist Party from that relationship. Now, Barry was saying, wasn't he, that he spoke to the security services throughout, and they hadn't explicitly said to him that he should end that relationship with her. That was a significant revelation. You put it to him, well, wouldn't it have been wise to do so in hindsight, given there was a clear concern there. Barry Gardiner said he hadn't been told to, and at no point had they said to him that the money that he was receiving came from illegitimate or illegal sources. Dove, I might just finish by raising a broader question about political funding. There is an ongoing debate about whether it is right that MPs should take donations from anybody, and I think that will be resurrected and further questions will be asked. Barry was saying he needed to use that money to fund caseworkers in his constituency. MPs do get a significant, albeit some say not enough, allowance from parliamentary authorities to employ staff. This debate potentially raises questions about whether that is the right way of doing it, or whether there should be more money and all donations to our politicians should be banned to avoid exactly this situation of arising.
Ben, thank you very much. Let me read you out a few texts. I'm going to do them just in the order that they've come in. This is from Steve in Hertfordshire. Ian, isn't it odd that the MI5 announcement has come today, one day after the PM's disastrous performance in the House? Just saying. Boss Cat says, this isn't a dead cat as it was announced by parliamentary authorities, not the government. Come on, LBC. Who do you think they all report to? This is a dead cat, a 5-year-old story. Stop being mugged off. Amma says, Barry Gardiner is a man of integrity. I wish Ian would grill his Tory chums the way he does decent people like Barry. I do, Amma. Cindy says, I have no doubt about... No, in fact, Barry has been a guest on my programme probably more than any other politician over the last year or two. We have a very good relationship, and it doesn't matter whether they're Labour or Conservative. They come into the studio, they're going to be treated the same way. Cindy says, I have no doubt about Barry Gardiner's integrity. And question for Barry on your show now, this is from someone else, isn't the assumption that most lobbyists and donors ask for something in return? He stated that she never asked for anything under the circumstances. Does he not think that a little odd? Well, Barry Gardiner will be returning into the studio in about 3 minutes' time to take your calls. 0345 6060 973. It's 7:30. News headlines with Amelia Cox.
Prince Andrew will no longer use the title His Royal Highness.
7:34. He's back. I didn't think we would have Barry Gardiner back in the studio quite so quickly, but he's happy to take your call, so I wasn't going to turn down that opportunity. Let's go to Trevor in Wembley. Hello, Trevor.
Yeah, hi Ian. Thanks for taking my call. Hello to Barry as well.
Hi, Trevor.
He's actually my local MP.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you remember, I met you a couple of years ago, Barry, when you held a talk at the Welfare Centre.
Oh, right.
Do you remember?
I'm stretching to remember, if I'm honest, Trevor.
It was about 4 years ago. Well, anyway, it's irrelevant, you know, but...
Okay, let's get to your question, Trevor.
I'm, so the question I wanted to ask, given, the information that's come out about this woman, how do you intend to continue running your office without the now illegal funding, let's say, from that woman?
Well, in fact, she hasn't funded anything in my office since June 2020. So my office has been running without that support since then.
Why did the funding stop then? Was it because you were no longer in the shadow cabinet, so not so useful?
Well, maybe it was. If I look back on it with hindsight, Ian, maybe that was the case. It was sometime after that, but she had actually closed her London office, I know, earlier that year. And certainly the reason that was given to me was that because they were changing their business model and they had closed their London office and had made some people redundant there, it would be completely wrong if she were funding people in my office when she were making people redundant in her own. And so I thought that was absolutely legitimate and accepted it at face value.
So, Trevor, are you worried about Barry's ability to service his constituents because of this?
I am, yeah, in a way I am, but another thing I wanted to say is that it's a bit hard to understand how, now that this woman has been identified as a spy, how is it that her own son was actually working in Barry's office as well? Well, even though I listened to what Barry's explanation, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it just seems... I think many people out there probably won't believe what Barry said, but I just want to make it clear that I do believe what Barry said.
I mean, let's cut to the quick here. Did she ever say to you, well, I'm very happy to continue funding your office, Barry, but you do need to employ my son?
No, she never ever said that. And in fact, I had first come across her 20 years ago because she was a lawyer who was helping the Chinese community in northwest London. I'd worked with her on cases, immigration cases at that stage. In fact, I was recommended to meet with her by my immigration caseworker, who said, look, this woman knows the immigration cases. She's been very active in this area. You should have a meeting with her because she knows her stuff.
So it wasn't her that came to you. You were introduced to her by someone else.
Yes, absolutely.
Ben on a text, thank you very much, Trevor. Ben on a text says, Barry, which came first? You being informed by the Secret Services that Christine Lee was under suspicion, or you employing her son? If it was the latter, why did you employ him?
I employed him before there was any contact with the security services.
Right.
And as I said, he had actually been a volunteer in my office prior to that. And I employed him because he was good at what he did. And I would stress again, as I said earlier in the programme, Iain, that the security services have been clear with me that they have no information that suggests that he was aware of his mother's illegal activity. And I want to say that as part of my responsibility for his health and safety as his former employer.
When you spoke to him earlier today, did you ask him if he was aware of what she was up to?
No, I didn't. Paul
is in Northampton. Hello, Paul.
Oh, good evening, Iain and Barry. Thank you for taking my call. Hope you're both well. Barry, before I present my question, I must say as a lifelong Conservative voter, it is incredibly refreshing to see politicians such as yourself taking the time to answer our questions, and I am starting to move over. So thank you for that.
Thank you,
Paul. I'm an estate agent, Barry, in my professional life, and there's one thing that I'm a bit confused about. If the police or security services or an equivalent agency contacted myself about a suspicious client, even if they were sort of a major client of my office, I would perhaps think, well, actually, even though they've not specifically said to stop dealing with this person, I might have wanted to distance myself. And I just wondered perhaps why you didn't, Barry, if that's okay to ask.
Yes, of course it's okay to ask. The first thing I would say is that you're a professional estate agent, and you have rules by which you operate, and you have a professional body. She is a solicitor in the United Kingdom and therefore highly regulated as a solicitor. She was somebody who, as I said earlier, had the trust of many politicians across the political spectrum, Conservative, Liberal, Labour. She was well known and respected. And when the security services first spoke to me about her, it was from the perspective of, was I aware that she had connections with Chinese business and the Chinese embassy in London, because she acted for them as well.
Were you aware of that?
I'm just trying to remember whether I was at the time. I'm not sure, Iain, in all honesty, but it wasn't a surprise to me.
I'm trying to put myself in your position.
Can I answer his question?
Yeah.
At that stage, I did ask the security services whether I should cease all engagement with her, and they did not say that I should.
They presumably didn't say you shouldn't either.
No, indeed. They said it was a matter for me to decide upon, but that they had no information that led them to believe that I ought to cease and desist having any engagement with her.
I think if I had been in your shoes then, okay, it's almost impossible to do that, but I'm going to try anyway.
Hindsight is wonderful.
It is a wonderful thing, as your leader often just... I think I would have taken that as at least an amber warning and then thought, no, I don't want to go any further with this. Did that thought go through your mind?
No. What went through my mind was I must ensure that I keep an open and transparent relationship with the security services about everything that I do with her. so that they are never caught off guard, as it were.
And even when this story in the Times appeared on February the 4th, 2017, where, I mean, they didn't say it in terms, but the allegations were fairly obvious, even then you didn't distance yourself from her.
I thought, and forgive me, I'm trying to piece this together now in retrospect, but I believe that the Times article was simply a rehash of an earlier one. And I was absolutely convinced that it was completely baseless.
Right, let's go back to the calls. Paul, thank you very much for that. Let's go to Alex in Cobham. Alex, hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just listening to the gentleman talking about how he hired the researchers.
Well, Alex, you're talking to him directly, so you don't need to refer him to as he.
Yeah, okay, that's right. No, why, if the history of Chinese infiltration into politics is in the carcasses of people like Sir Malcolm Rifkin and the other Labour minister, and them coming into leadership of society, and even if he got the response from MI5 that it was okay, still it's a PR disaster. You know, if he's going to ruin his career by expecting £430,000. I listened to his explanations, but it still loses his reputation with his constituents, and frankly, listening to it makes me angry that a public servant who's making decisions for the future of our country can expose himself to that. How is he going to do? Can you answer that question?
Sure, Alex. Look, I hope and trust that my constituents look to me for the work that I do for them, and that they will judge me on that basis. And I have never asked of them anything other than that, to judge me on how I perform in protecting their interests and in helping them where they need my help. As I explained earlier, the people who were working in my office were assisting me in doing that, and I believed that assistance was coming from a friend whom I trusted implicitly, and who the rest of British society, from Theresa May and David Cameron on down, also trusted implicitly and indeed awarded accolades to. She was, to all intents and purposes, a model British citizen of Chinese origin. And that's what I took her to be. Now, you say, well, this has affected the way in which people might look at me. I recognise that. I'm obviously upset about that. I feel deeply hurt that somebody tried to abuse their relationship with me in the way that it appears she did.
Do you worry?
And I'm angry about it.
Do you worry that, I mean, when you left the shadow cabinet, when Keir Starmer became leader, when was it, April 2020? You've been doing this fire and rehire campaign. Your political career is sort of, I think it would be true to say, revived a little bit. You're still sort of up there. You're a well-known figure. Do you fear that this is going to affect that it is going to damage your future political career?
Iain, look, I've always focused on doing my job and not burnishing my reputation. I think if politicians spend all the time trying to parade themselves around as spick and span, and then actually that's not what they should be doing.
Let's go to Robbie in Liverpool. Hello, Robbie.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Hi. Welcome. You're a first-time caller, I believe.
Good. I am, yeah. I'm ringing up to actually support Barry, because I just think tonight he's gone through some real tough scrutiny. He's gone out there. He's put his hands up in the air. He's given explanations. And I think that demonstrates to me integrity in a politician. He's not running away. He's here. He stayed on, like you said, that is in his insistence, and he's actually faced the music. And for me, that's what I'd look for in, somebody who's a public servant, somebody who can say, you know what, I've got it wrong, but I'm here to explain why.
Robbie, thank you for saying that. That's very kind. And I really do appreciate you saying it, because it has been a very tough day in many respects. But I've just tried to be as open and transparent as I possibly can be about these things.
Robbie, thank you. Don says on Twitter, I've just heard Iain Dale haranguing Barry. Do you feel harangued, Barry?
No, I think you've been perfectly fair, to be
over
honest.
Chinese agent Christine Lee. With the benefit of hindsight, perhaps if Iain had used the same forensic aggressive tactics in the 2019 Johnson-Hunt Tory leadership hustings, Partygate might never have happened. Well, I was there, Don. You weren't. I know what pressure I put Boris Johnson under, and believe me, certainly in that first one, it was quite a lot, but that's a story for another day. We'll come back to more of your calls to Barry Gardiner in just a second. 0345 6060 973.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
7:51. I wish you were able to ask Boris these tough questions and have Boris answer every question like Barry has. Which political side are you, Iain? Well, I haven't interviewed Boris Johnson since those hustings in 2019, and there's a reason for that, because he didn't like the questions I was asking him. Simple as that. Cliff is in Hayes. Hello, Cliff.
Oh, hi, Iain. Good speaking with you again. Firstly, a lot of respect to Barry Gardiner for coming on and taking the questions. Can't be easy when you've had this story breaking today. My question is basically this. Across the political spectrum over the last few years, there's been a lot of criticism of MPs employing friends and family in their offices, because I know, for example, Barry actually employs his wife as his office manager. With regards to Miss Lee's son, you stated that you advertised the vacancy. With that in mind, roughly how many CVs did you receive and how many interviews were carried out before he was appointed?
First of all, just to thank you for the question. My wife is actually my immigration and asylum, visa immigration and asylum office manager, which is separate from my overall office manager, just to be absolutely clear about that. And she has worked for me from before the regulations changed, so she is permissible to work for me as the one permitted family member allowed to do that by the parliamentary rules, because she predated the change in the rules about a decade later. In all honesty, I can't tell you how many CVs I would have received.
10, 50, 100?
For most applications, we would receive anywhere between 20 and 40 applications. I wouldn't see all of the applications. Usually my office manager would then whittle them down to a short list who I would then interview and decide between.
How many people did you interview for this job?
In all honesty, I can't remember, but it would have probably been 3.
But you definitely interviewed people. It wasn't an automatic assumption that he was going to get it.
I'm sure that that's the standard process that we always operate under, that we have an open selection process, and then there are applications and there are interviews.
Cliff? No, Cliff's gone. Right, let's go to Kieran, who's in Durham. Hello, Kieran.
Good evening. I'd like to ask, first and foremost, Barry, hats off to you for holding your hands up today. Must have been tough. I'd like to ask you, moving forward, what do you think needs to be done to make sure this kind of thing can't happen again? Obviously, as much as that is possible to control.
Yeah. I need to reflect on that, and actually, and I think so does Parliament, because this has been something that clearly has been happening across all political parties. That's what the security services said, and all MPs are going to be targeted in that way, and therefore it is important that not just I give it some thought, but that Parliament does as a whole. Clearly, the fundamental thing in anything like this is transparency. There has to be transparency, because then people can look at it and say, this doesn't look right, or, yeah, this looks okay. Now, sometimes we get that wrong. And clearly, in this case, I got it badly wrong. I believed that she was the person who I took her to be and that she purported to be. it's clear from the security services information that that was not the case. So, yeah, I'm disappointed, and obviously I will look at all the relationships that I have with people across the spectrum, and I hope it doesn't make me somebody who is naturally cynical. I don't feel I am, but perhaps I will be less open and trusting than I clearly was in this case.
Kieran, quickly.
Yeah, just I think it speaks volumes that you've been willing to take questions, Barry. And thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Kieran. Let's go to Alice in Northwich in Cheshire. Alice, hi, what would you like to ask?
Yes, first, I do appreciate you coming on air, and I think it's very shocking because you've been a British citizen for over 20 years, so very shocking for you. I'm sorry, but I just wonder, thinking of the parliamentary estate as a whole, what access to information, etc., would her son have been likely to have?
In my office, he was in charge of diary management. He would have prepared responses to. He did prepare responses for the standard questions that we got from organisations like 38 Degrees that issue circular letters basically to all MPs, and he would have liaised with what is called the Parliamentary Research Service, who provides standard answers to MPs to all those stock questions.
What about this point that David makes on a text? How secure was Barry's confidential information in his office, especially in relation to dissidents living in Brent? Could it now be in the office of the intelligence services in China?
No, I don't believe it could.
And
I'm clear.
You are 100% confident that her son was not in on it? Well, you can't be 100%, can you?
I now realise that 100% confidence is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah. Have you had your office swept?
No, I haven't.
Maybe an idea.
It's a very good idea.
I'm slightly surprised the security services haven't mentioned it.
I imagine that is something that maybe they have done without telling me, or maybe they've actually put bugs in there to check. But I don't know. But certainly I'm confident that the security services were clear with me, because I asked them specifically if they had any indication that he was aware of his mother's illegal actions, and they were clear that he didn't. They said they had no information to that effect.
Let's go to Sean, who's a first-time call in Holyhead. Hello, Sean.
Hi, I'm just phoning a message of support. Fair play to Barry. You know, you've got a clown of a Prime Minister there who won't answer any questions and who will smirk when he's asked a question and hide away from him. But he hasn't come out saying it how it is, really. You know, just fair play to him, that's all I want to say.
OK, Sean, thank you very much. I'm sure Barry appreciates that.
Thank you, Sean. Yes.
Quickly to Alex in Watford. Alex, hi.
Good evening, Ian. Good evening, Barry. I want to say this with regret, sir. Don't you think you've played into Boris Johnson's hands? Are you going to resign over this matter and set an example to the Prime Minister?
I'm not going to resign over this matter because I don't believe that at any stage I acted in bad faith. I don't believe at any stage that I have lied about this. I have always been open and transparent. What has happened is something that I deeply regret. And as I said earlier, if I had any belief that she was the person that the security services now tell me she is, then obviously things would have been very different. And I regret the fact that I did not know this before.
Thank you very much, Alex. Joan says, can someone at LBC send a copy of this audio interview to number 10 to show how real politicians show up and answer questions and no fridges needed? And final text, if Barry needs a new PA, I'm an experienced PA. That's from Alice. I don't know whether that was the Alice that you talked to. But
the job will be openly advertised, and I would be delighted to read the CVs.
Listen, I know how difficult it is to be in the eye of a storm. I think think, judging from the reaction we've had on the calls, and some people may say, well, why did you put so many supportive calls through? Well, you kind of try and reflect what calls are the calls that are coming in. Certainly on the texts and tweets, you've had quite a lot of support. People not only understand what you've said, but they are really grateful to you for stepping up to the plate. So I want to add my thanks to that. Barry Gardiner, thank you for joining us.